You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. And sometimes normal.
On this episode, I'm joined by Jeffery Wilson. Jeffery is the head of That Podcast Network, the solo host of It's Me Speaking to You, and the co-host of the extremely popular podcast, The Conspiracy Farm. This is a bucket list interview, as I've been a farmer ever since the early days. Jeffery and I discussed the current state of politics and outrage culture, the looming presence of new mask mandates being issued, ancient archaeology and how that would upend current dogmatic beliefs, and we even discussed the time Jeffery performed stand-up opening for Sam Tripoli and Eddie Bravo. This one was a lot of fun, and Jeffery is really knowledgeable about everything that I stumbled through. I'm sure you're following him already, but if not, please do so and let him know you heard him on Wild and Weird. Enjoy the show. Are you looking for CBD for your pet? My friends at Pure Pet Wellness have what you need. They use the highest quality ingredients. While other companies may use synthetic oils in their CBD, Pure Pet Wellness uses organic ingredients, organically grown hemp, organic coconut oil, organic shea butter, organic beeswax, and that's just to name a few. A family-owned and operated company that also offers fast shipping. Go to purepetwellness.com for all your pet's CBD needs and use the discount code WILD and WEIRD at checkout. That's WILD, A-N-D, WEIRD. Treat your animal right. Go to purepetwellness.com. Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey, escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian. And tonight, my guest is Jeffery Wilson. He is the head of the podcast network. He's the host of a solo podcast, It's Me Speaking to You. And he is the co-host of the amazing podcast called The Conspiracy Farm. Jeffery, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the invite, man. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, man. How about you?
I can't complain. Had some tech issues, which always seems to happen. Murphy's Law when it comes to doing this kind of stuff. But, you know, every day above ground's a good day, man. Doing all right.
We came out the other side of it, so it's okay. That's fine.
At least for today, we did, for sure.
Yeah. So, Jeffery, tell me a little bit about the podcast network, Me Speaking to You, and the Conspiracy Farm.
Yeah, I mean, that podcast network spawned from like all of the stuff kind of we've been doing. I'd started with my show, It's Me Speaking to You, kind of it's a long name. So for like hashtag purposes, I spell it, It's Me, SPKN, the number 2, the letter U. So if you want to look it up, amongst other things, that's one of the ways you can find it. But yeah, I started that, and I think it was like 2015, maybe. Yeah, it was just more, I'm an actor, voiceover actor. You know, I've been in SAG for since whatever, a while, like 15 years. So you just never know when that, like, to keep sharpening the sword, if you will, you know, your voice, and just, I've always been inquisitive and like talking to people. So that's kind of where It's Me Speaking to You came from. First guest was Pat Miletich, UFC Hall of Famer. Had him on a few times to talk about a myriad of stuff. And after one of the episodes, he asked to do the Conspiracy Farm with him. And I was like, dude, you're kidding right now. So it took me to really get that he was truthful about it or really wanted to do it. And we were off to the races, man. It was, it's been a fun ride. We don't do it near as frequently because our lives are just like different places and we're just doing a bunch of other stuff, but we still do it. Like when he was on Joe Rogan or Stone Cold Steve, I mean, it just really helped bounce the show. So as we start doing it less frequently, we start thinking about like kind of rebranding the platform. So instead of just being about one show or even my show, expanding it for up and coming podcasters. Cause I mean, especially now, I mean, there's ocean of podcasts out here. So even with our platform, we just top 5 million views. I mean, it's in the world of podcasts, it's really whatever. It's something because it's an accomplishment, but I mean, it's a head start, if you will, for up and coming podcasters to kind of get their voice out there, their show out there, their content out there on an established platform or network, if you will. So yeah, we've just been slowly adding to it. I got some fantasy sports guys coming up. I got former Raiders wide receiver Kenny Shed. He does a show on there called K Shed Uncuffed. After he retired from the game, he went on to become a police officer. So he has very interesting conversations as well. And we're just slowly adding to it, man. I take the platform very seriously. So I do have it's not just anybody can jump on it, because I want you to be serious about what it is. You know what I mean? We worked really hard to establish this platform and the numbers, et cetera. So I want people who are coming on board to take the platform as serious as well. And just adding to it, man. Just adding to it.
That's awesome, man. I like that your platform has, I don't want to say like regular people, like we're not regular people, or you're not a regular person or whatever. But sometimes you get caught up in all of the conspiracy talk or, the truth movement, whatever you want to, phrase it, or whatever dumb name it has. But, I love being in this. I love being in my deep Twitter dive and everything else and, seeing what's happening. But then also like stepping back, and I live in the Philadelphia area. So like watching the Eagles and watching the Sixers and like listening to regular music, and not everything has to be like, oh, but the NFL does this or the NBA. And it's just nice to step back and like just regular people and see what's happening and immerse yourself in that.
It can be a lot, especially when we were doing the conspiracy farm, especially during COVID. Like we were crushing it. As far as our kind of podcast goes, we were in the top 50 on news and politics on iTunes. We were beating like CNN stuff, Fox stuff, because we were locked down. So we were just pumping it out. Literally almost an episode a day is what it really was. But it can be very taxing. And again, like anything in life, moderation and do things in balance. Like you said, have an off switch, if you will, because this world can be really, it can be pretty heavy at times.
Yeah, typically I try to stay away from the third rail topics, and that's really easy to do because that's my choice. And then the politics, if anything, I try to go the middle. And like, honestly, for politics, like I hate both sides. Like they're all there to make money, and it's like, unfortunately, it comes out of our pocket. So I try.
It's all organized crime, baby. It's all organized crime.
That's all it is. Common. Different heads of the mafia, and that's what you're doing. And you hope that one's better for you or whatever it is. But it's all a scam. But so I think for this episode, I might dip my toes a little bit more into that world. And so we just mentioned COVID. And the other day, Alex Jones had breaking news that he talked to a TSA insider and a Homeland Security insider, and they were going to bring back mask mandates starting the TSA for the workers. We're going to start in mid-September. And then I think like in October, they were going to do it for pilots. And then by the end of the year, it was going to be for everybody. And I love these predictions like this because, we can find out in a month or two. And it's not like, oh, well, and you 20, can 45.
If you know how to sort of read the tea leaves, not that I'm some guru on it, but I've been posting on @conspiracyfarm1 on Twitter, for the last couple. Here we go again. Like the COVID such and such, the variants ramping up here, and they've already teased the whole masks are possibly going to be brought back. I didn't hear specifically what Alex did and through CDC or any kind of anything official, but this is kind of how these kind of things oftentimes gets the slow rollout of, even though whatever, I'm no epidemiologist, et cetera, but as it mutates, it becomes less lethal. So this new mutation, even though it might be new, is going to be less lethal. But, here we are in an election season, same stuff, different day.
Right. So in Atlanta, I saw a college today. I forget the name of the college, possibly Brown. There was a longer name than Brown. I think Brown was in it. Anyway, so that they've been open for 2 weeks, and they just sent a message to their students that they were going to start masking on campus again. And then one of the studios in California that they're going to start doing that too. I know there's the writer's strike, but I guess the studios still operate at some point with people in there who aren't writing, but they now have mask mandates.
We have non-union. You have non-union stuff going on all the time.
Right. Yeah. So they've now implemented the mask mandate for this new variant that masks don't stop anyway, and they become less lethal as they mutate. So
that's really kind of the on the face absurdity. The N95 might be a little different, but it gets into a larger conversation of, fool me once, and then are we really prepared to do this again? Are we really prepared to do this again?
So that's my question going to be for you. What do you think the response is going to be this time around. Do you think people took anything away from the last time?
No, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, in this, it gets into one of these things that I often talk about because we get so caught up in this binary right, left, black, white, gender, whatever it is, whatever these mechanisms of division. But as we get into COVID, everybody's business was shut down. If you had a business, it affected everybody. It transcended all of these things that we're divided upon. So this is something. It reminds me of this young man's song that's just dropped and taken over everything. Oliver, I forget his name, but the guy with the red beard, Oliver Anthony. I mean, what he's saying is resonating with everybody. It's people who may not even like country music, but the message and what he's saying is like, dude, it's this. So to answer your question, will this work again? I think for some group of people, this kind of stuff will always work. You will always have to some degree of, lack of a better term, order followers, if you will. But I think there'll be much more pushback. I think this time, which I think's kind of been the move all along. They're slowly, incrementally pushing us towards this kind of much more restricted authoritarian state kind of thing. Not that I'm anxious to see, but I'll be anxious to see how this plays out. You had the Commissar kind of neighbors narking on people for having more than 7 people in different states and cities. It can get gnarly, man. It can get gnarly. It could get interesting. I don't think there'll be less that follow it this time, but there'll still be, a government mandate's a government mandate. And the pushback could be interesting, could be very interesting.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of out on the line of it. You'd like to think that people learn their lesson, or, the people who lost their businesses, that they're like, I'm never doing this again. But it's also kind of like the frog that's boiled in the water. Like if you just slowly tick it up a little bit, and then people are like, oh, okay, I'll wear a mask for 2 weeks, or it's only in the grocery store, or it's only when I have to go in, whatever, Home Depot. And then they come out and now it's, well, just send your kids to school for 3 days a week with a mask. And slowly it ramps up and it's a slippery slope. I think.
Well, and again, this is an election season. So next November will be here in a blink of an eye. And now we're talking about paper ballots and shit like that. Regardless of what you think about the election or whatever, it just opens that window of more of that conversation of like, is this on the up and up? Like they're bringing in these practices that we know aren't necessarily, nothing's really error free, but we know there was some, I don't know if I can cuss on your show, but we know there's some effery around when it comes to the elections. Not even on both sides. You've had both sides. When Trump won, you had a whole bunch of them saying like, the Russians stole it and they interfered. I mean, we know there's effery in elections without a shadow of a doubt. So let's just open that door here, too.
So you don't have to feel like you have to censor yourself.
I didn't want to assume.
Oh, don't worry. We love all the words. Why do you think, and this is a bigger question, and I know why the elections aren't secure. I mean, you can say one side cheated but both sides have cheated throughout history. Do you think this is just like as you're in power, you just deny it because you think you're going to be able to do it again? And then when the other side happens to win, they can't really crack down on it that much because they kind of used it too? Or like,
yeah, they all, again, in my opinion, they're all a certain, when I say gangsters, they're not like your Capone, Lucky Luciano kind of gangsters. I just did an episode with a guy, Seth Ferrante, that has a movie called Dope Man, the original gangsters of dope, basically. And it gets into all this kind of crap. But our mind, as far as mafia and organized crime, tends to be the 5 families, Genovese, Gambino, Bonanno, Colombo, Lucchese, the New York families in New Jersey or whatever, but which is true, but the block is much bigger for the big gangsters. You know what I mean? So I think that really exists. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Why do you think nobody really cracks down on election interference? And push this false narrative from both sides.
They're all doing it because they're all really doing it. And I always say, like, when you see somebody get pinched for this, like sex stuff or prostitution, they're all doing it and they're all compromised on some level. That was kind of what Jeffrey Epstein's job was, among other people like him, to keep compromise and put them in certain positions. When they get pinched for it, it's like, all right, well, who'd they piss off? Because you're all doing it. So for the fact that you called him out, okay, you must have pissed off XYZ, and now they're pulling out the file they have of you, of them, whatever it is, the compromised material. So, they're all playing a very interesting game. And again, I think it's all kind of organized crime. It's also at the same time WWE to a large extent, but they're fighting over the block, which is the world. But a lot of it's still, there's a lot of Vince McMahon going on behind the scenes. When I say Vince McMahon, putting things in motion, if any of that makes sense.
No, I definitely think it does. And that's why, I was saying for both sides that in general, I don't trust the government on either side. Like, I don't want one side in power more than the other. I think it should be a smaller government and back to the people. And, I get like we need trains run on time and roads fixed and airports and things like that. but we also don't need them
Sure.
in every part of our life that they're infringing upon already. And it just makes it interesting that as you see, the Republicans are, I think they're in control of the House now, but like this, so they try to pass stuff, but they can't get it into the Senate.
Right.
But they don't do anything because
Right.
they don't want to do
anything. They run the Congress, they run the House of Representatives, and they're doing these oversight hearings, but they're literally doing nothing about uncovering, whatever the Bidens are doing, man. Clearly, there's some shady shit, which doesn't surprise me because they're all doing it on some level. But it's interesting that you're indicting the former guy, which whatever, if he did something wrong, take care of it. But I hate to be, but Hillary gets the unclassified server and walks away. I mean, it's just this non-legitimate and selective kind of butthurtness on why we're mad at this person, but why this person gets away with it or whatever. I find that interesting, kind of the, I don't know, WWE side of it, because I think a lot of these indictments for Trump is partially a work. I know one side says like they want him in jail, which I mean, I guess there might be people who do, but there's going to be a larger reaction and subsequent effect to all these indictments. And even if he gets in jail, whoever's come in they're gonna pardon him, unless maybe it's Biden. I don't know. But I think most of this is theater, as they say. The world is a stage, and a lot of this has a lot of theater to it. In my humble opinion, could be wrong.
I think you're on the right track, if not on the exact track. They were talking about trying to start some of these trials in December and January, in the middle of convention time. I really think it's just to scare people off for voting for him who would.
Yeah, for sure. But it's literally backfiring according to as each indictment grows. That's why I think they're making kind of a martyr of him, because he's saying, hey, this whatever deep state is after me, and we're watching like, all right, we know they're all corrupt, but 4 fucking indictments, like, damn, bro. While we sit and watch all the like literally cocaine being found in the White House, and we know who occupies it, Hillary. I mean, all of it. Like the fact that they're so focused on this while this other stuff, it's pretty fascinating, quite frankly.
It's gonna be interesting, as I see history being written in real time, that it's not what's actually happening. It will be interesting, like to step back 20 years from now, with a clear eye, and then see how this was and like how it turned out. If we're still here,
well, hopefully, hopefully you will have learned your Mandarin and your Cantonese by then, because China's the model, man. China's the model for where we're going.
It is scary times over there. All right, so we mentioned Oliver Anthony in passing. He wrote a song called "Rich Men North of Richmond," and it came out on YouTube or Twitter or something about a week ago, and now it just hit #1 on the Billboard Top 100. It was the first time. I think there's only one of 6. He's one of 6 artists, I believe, who have ever went from not being anywhere on the Billboard to #1. So his song is it's country. It's a little more like bluegrassy. It's very, very country, twangy. But the message has kind of like a Depression era message. There's the Northmen of Richmond is Washington, D.C. They make all these decisions. They want to control your money. You're not really saying anything for your taxes, things like that. There has been selective outrage. There's been, this is like right-wing dog whistles. The mainstream media is coming out and telling you why this isn't even art to begin with. And if he's such a loving American and a Christian, if he's all these things, why is he saying bad things about people in the song? But he's talking about taking advantage of welfare. Why is he saying bad things about the song? And if he loves America so much, he should just write this rose-colored glass song of all the positive things America is or could be. And, to step out and have an opinion otherwise, was offensive to the mainstream media.
You can't do that. You can't do that. Have an opinion contrary to the status quo. It's dangerous waters, man.
Do you think that the support for him is real, or do you just think that it's so anti, like Hollywood mainstream, that people are clinging to that?
I mean, it's whatever. It's one of the Newtonian laws of physics, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Somebody's going to always have something to say about something, right? I mean, I don't know. I really take ownership and really am focused on what I give my energy to, and people's reaction on shit. Like, I don't, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I really don't give a shit, because I'm like in my own lane doing my own shit. That song knocks, dude. Whatever he is, if it was organic or non-organic, like I said, the lyrics and then the way he like almost hauntingly like I'm not making fun of it. He like belts it out. He viscerally feels what he's saying, or at least he's playing it very well. That's why it's resonating with so many people. And for me, that's more what I give a shit about. I mean, they're after fucking, what's that song? That Christmas song. It's cold outside. Like, really? That's what we're doing. Granted, it is a little creepy, the video. I mean, whatever. But I mean, meanwhile, we have wet ass pussies and drill music and all this other horrible crap. But this is what we're going for, really? Our priorities and our selective butthurtness just shines through shit like this. Because for me, again, it's one of those things like COVID. It transcends race and politics. The middle class is getting fucked over, doing more work for less pay, dollars buying less. Our money's going off to subsidize. There's only tens of billions to Ukraine, and we're subsidizing their retirement and whatever you think about the war in Ukraine. Like, this allocation of funds is fucking next level. And this is going to have, and it already is having, a very detrimental impact on our economy. So like something like this is really, like I said, it taps into that zeitgeist, and it's really kind of laser focus. And he had that total package. He's clear. I don't mean this disparaging. He's clearly a less than. I mean, a middle class. You know, he's out in the fucking woods with his two dogs. I mean, he's almost doing the archetypal hillbilly look or whatever. But I mean, there's obviously more to this man, and the things he's speaking and singing about is clearly resonating with everybody. And this is all just speculation, but that intertwined with even people kind of on the middle or the left, like, all right, you hate Trump, but fuck, dude, really? It's while we're watching all this other crazy shit play out, again, something like this, so salient and laser focused, like, pew, it cuts through all the bullshit, and it makes it harder for them to keep selling us this bullshit. Because you can't tell me, whatever, I'm sorry, I'm going off, but you know, the inflation's not here. Like, the economy's fine. Your dollar's buying fucking shit tons. Like, no, we're all living in it. We're at $3. I'm up the street and here, High Ridge, out in the boonies in Missouri, $3.60 for a gallon of gas. You know, whatever.
That's how
So
rich of a
whatever
nation
anybody
that we
has to
are.
say about it.
Like, as milk goes up, like, you should be grateful that we're that rich of a nation that like milk could even be $8 a gallon. You know, like, that's what they try to sell you on. And it's like, no, that's like not how inflation works. Like, no, you don't get it.
You should be very thankful. This is Weimar Republic type shit. You bring in all your Deutschmarks or whatever it was, or you're for, you know, a loaf of bread, millions of marks for a loaf of bread or whatever. I mean, that's essentially where we're hopefully not going to, knock on wood, but that's kind of where it's going. And again, I think this is by design because they're brought to bring in something else, the CBDC, the central bank digital currency type shit. Like, again, China's the model. So that's a larger conversation, but they need us divided, though. Going back to the root of what you're talking about, they need us divided. So create those groups, separate those groups, play those groups off against each other. That's the, you know, whatever they call it, neo-Marxism, Western Marx. That's Marxist shit 101, bro. While they do what they're doing up here, we're arguing about bathrooms and who can piss in a bathroom and just, I mean, it's whatever. If you're trans or have shit going on like that, you know, fight your fight, bro. But it's much larger than any of that.
Right. They want us fighting at the lower level while they're controlling stuff at the top level without organizing to like even see what they're doing. Right. And then for, you know, Oliver Anthony, you know, he's like Appalachia and like complete to them, it's just like a flyover state, you know, like, oh, how could Ohio not vote for us? Because you don't fucking go there, man. That's why they don't vote for you. You know, you don't care about them. Everything you pass has nothing to do with them. And that's what this guy's singing about. And if you don't like the song, I do recommend you just look at the lyrics. And I forget his name, the Marine rapper. He did a little rap over it that was, you know, kind of a different take with the beat, with Oliver Anthony playing the guitar and the background part of it. But everyone's saying the same message. And, you know, I think maybe one of the reasons they're trying to, you know, these elitists, you know, the Atlantic, of like, let me tell you why this song is so bad, is like, this is the type of stuff that could like really unite people, for them to look at this and be like, hey man, like, all of our dollars are hurting. No matter how well off you're doing, your dollar's still not buying what it did before.
Yeah.
You know, and they're saying, I think the last I saw was on average from last year, a household spending $800 more per month. You know, like the average car payment's like $1,000.
That's why when people like deny this shit, I'm like, you should be more ripped because of the fucking gymnastics you would have to do to rationalize making this okay. Like you said, no, man, you live in a country where you get to pay $8 for a meal. It's messed up because, again, I think this is a very much larger conversation of why we accept it. Going back to you're talking about COVID and stuff, I think there is a certain, and I use this phrase all the time, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, a mass kind of Stockholm syndrome where we continue to believe the same motherfuckers who have lied to us over and over and over again. It because they would never do that. Like, what the fuck, dude? I mean, things we have to point out that has been lied to us about on like an egregious level. But again, this gets into something, again, I talk about, and I hate to keep saying that, but I do talk about this on the phone, like a trauma-based, fear-based conditioning is how they hit the masses with, scare the shit out of you. So then you're more willing to, that Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem, we obviously react, and they bring into the solution to the problem we create. But it has a oftentimes a trauma-based, fear-based to it. 9/11, Gulf of Tonkin. I mean, it's WMDs, COVID. I mean, it happens quite often.
Even the Maui fires are saying they're just because of climate change, and they're saying that the people's poor reaction to putting the fires out was because of the stress of climate change. Like they didn't release water to put it out because that person was stressed from, like, that is such bullshit. Like, answer the question directly when they're asking you, like, how many people are missing, and they just gloss over it. It's sad.
And you
man.
are hearing that already. You are already hearing that. And yes, that's, again, not to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but climate change originally, until they rebranded it, was just another base of eugenics and how saying human beings are the worst. Too many human beings, man. We got to get rid of you guys. And now it's tied to CO2. And we're now the ones creating all of this drought, all of this. Of course, we have an impact on the planet or whatever, but it's a hustle. Not to say climate change. Of course, climate change. That's why we have fucking seasons. The climate changes. We get it. But I get what people are talking about in larger macro, our impact on the planet. I mean, planet's going to be around, been around a long time before we got here, and will be well long after we're gone. But this is a hustle to move us into whatever you want to call it, the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset. This is all part of this hustle.
You know, I agree with that. Because
in my humble opinion.
I agree with your opinion because they don't lay a plan out. Like for COVID, it was always each day they were figuring out, like, no, we're still 2 weeks for the curve. We're still 2 weeks.
Yes.
And you're like, dude, it's been like 2 years. And for climate change, it's not like, hey, here's our 10-step plan. It's like, here's our plan number one. You're going to pay a ton more in energy. We're going to cut off electricity. We're going to put up windmills. And we're going to give China and India, who's the biggest polluter on the planet for CO2, we're actually going to give them your money that we're taking to help them for equity and not actually to solve the planet. But if they laid out a 10-step plan and said, hey, like, this is the best way, I think everybody could agree, like, what can we do better for the planet? I bring up Boy on Slate all the time. Boy on Slate. He was on Joe Rogan one time. He does the ocean cleanup project. He's cleaning up the Great Pacific Ocean garbage patch. He's like,
I heard about, yeah.
He's an amazing kid. He's like in his 20s now, though. He was on Rogan. He was like 18. But everyone says it. Oh, the problem's too big. You can't do it. And this guy was just like, well, what's the problem? I'm going to go try to do it. Like everyone else just saw it as too big. And like he laid out his plan and he has these steps.
For sure.
He's actually doing it. You can get behind him. Like, what is that for our bigger problems?
For sure. I mean, that's, it's a small bite of the whale, of course, but I mean, everyone needs to be biting at the whale of, all these different ways, like you said, to help the environment. But I mean, ultimately, I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people care and stuff, but I mean, not to get into the cobalt conversation, but the reason we're talking and we talk on our phone is because of cobalt, and cobalt's slaved by kids and human slavery in the, Eastern Congo or whatever it is. So again, we do the mental gymnastics to rationalize, but I need my laptop and my phone for my podcast. See, I got to get the word out, but we don't mind using and benefit from the fruits of that kind of labor. So not literally, but kind of, we're all kind of full of shit. And again, we all do our best to rationalize. Like I said, we're butthurt about this, but we don't say anything about that. Like, we're really mad about the Oliver song, but the multi-million-dollar multinational corporations that pay these kids, particularly drill rap, and I mean, I'm old, I used to listen to gangster rap and shit too, but like they pay these guys to profit on the death of a community. We don't say shit about that. You know what I mean? And the gun violence proves it out, and this gets into much larger social issues as to why this is bad. But I'm just saying, why are we mad about that? We're mad about freaking Oliver, and it's a dog whistle, and this and that. Like, really? The motherfucker, like you said, he's one of 6 people to ever be on the bill, unsigned to be on the bill. So anyway, going back to what I was saying, people will always find a reason to hate on something. But again, the selective butthurtness then kind of calls them out when they're so adamant about this or that, but silent as church mouse about certain other things.
Right. It makes it hard. Yeah, even the people are like, oh, I'm going to go boycott Target. Like, I don't want to go do this. Like, okay, well, do you look at where your clothes are made? Like, every single shirt you buy, do you see, like, if it's made in Taiwan, then it's probably a small child doing it, or like, your iPhone 15 that you had to get.
I mean,
because,
Nike,
like, the 12 wasn't
like Nike. Yeah. Like, we know what Nike is, but we LeBron, Michael Jordan. I mean, again, we rationalize this shit. And I don't know what really the solution is, because I mean, it's like I said, we're all in some way kind of full of shit, and our own, even just participation in the system, it helps keep it going, because that's the only way it really can thrive, is if we participate in it. So here we are.
It's tough, man. I think a lot of people want the world to be better, or to at least move as like a smoother machine. And it just is the problem too big that some people just shut down? Is it? And I wouldn't. I mean,
it's. I think it's one of those, not to overuse a kind of cliched. I think it's John Lennon. Like, if the world wasn't run by psychopaths, I think we'd be pretty good off. I mean, I don't think the problem is too big. I just think we have too many people who are in control of shit who really don't have our real benefit in mind. And we see that play out every single day and have throughout almost history. The people in charge look at us as kind of ones and zeros. That's why I always say, and I didn't coin the phrase, but like the Matrix is more of a documentary. We're just fuels for the machine. And I don't know. Like I said, it's if the world wasn't run by people with such ill intentions, I think it's not necessarily the problem. It's people who are running the problem who really don't want solutions.
Right. They get these cush jobs running it, even both sides.
Well, and they operate off of like societies do. Order out of chaos, man. Order out of chaos. Create the chaos and then benefit or bring order to the chaos you created. Happens all the fucking time.
Right. Like the elder abuse that happens in government, like they had Dianne Feinstein get wielded. The poor woman is 95 years old, should be in a nice home, being taken care of by her family. And then she has an aide whispering her to like say the word yes as there's a vote. She has no idea what's happening. Mitch McConnell completely just blew a circuit the other day. He was standing at a podium to give a speech and just did not move for 15 seconds. Did they call 911? Did they get a doctor to come look at him? This seemed like stroke-like symptoms. Did they take him for a check? No, they took him off stage for 10 minutes and brought him back out. He's like, oh, I feel better now. Like, people don't freeze like that for that long. You weren't trying to gain a thought. Like, there was a medical episode happening. But speaking
of Dianne Feinstein, no one ever really went into that whole, I had a Chinese spy as a driver for the last 20 years. Kind of left that alone. Interesting. Or who was it? Peter Swalwell, who was smashing on, I think, or Fang Fang or something like that. Like, just went away. But Trump and his paying off hookers, well, that rises to the occasion. It's ridiculous. It's hard to take it serious, but it is serious because the implications are so serious.
Yeah, I think probably both sides were making money off of China, and that's why they don't.
Oh, without a doubt,
speak up. And then if you're going to go nail her, then maybe you look at some of the people who are married in Congress and where their spouse came from. And China's long-term
Mitch
plan.
McConnell.
I'm sorry. Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think they're pretty confirmed rumors that if you are a Chinese nationalist, for the most part, allegedly, that you are always to service of your government whenever they come calling. When China comes calling for you to come, go to university and get paid and go get any job and any high type and work your way up as high as possible, you're going to repay the state.
Well, I mean, in so many words, but yeah, the infiltration, if you will, has been happening for a very long time, to the point where I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we heard, or the report was, the Chinese CCP, even though it's kind of small money, like whatever it is, 17 million into different school districts. Yeah, I mean, they're just publicly acknowledging it, but that's already been happening for very long time. That's why, like, when the Miss Act, I think it was the National Defense Authorization Act, legalizing propaganda, we can do it now, even though we've been doing it forever. We can now legally do it. So it's just like, it's ridiculous.
It really is. And letting, I guess, foreign nationalists, or letting a country, China was buying up properties around military bases, like all military bases, and they were just letting that go through. And they do nothing to stop it. Repossess the land and give it back.
Well, I mean, people forget about Chinagate, when essentially there was a huge tech transfer to the Chinese via the Clinton administration and the U.S. government.
Yeah, I think because if you speak out of that, then you're going to get cut off from the faucet. They're going to turn it off for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I haven't had the chance to interview Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and regardless of what anybody thinks about him, I was interviewing the former head of the NSA and a guy who was promoting a book about fifth generation warfare, which I find fascinating. Nonlinear asymmetrical warfare, I think, is very fascinating, because it's not, with a kinetic war, you know who your enemy is, but with asymmetric, nonlinear type stuff, propaganda, assassination, cyber attacks, economic stuff that plays behind the scenes is what we're really, really seeing. So yeah, it is the grand chessboard, and the power, to me, seems to be shifting in this way by design towards kind of Eurasia. Not to get too deep into like the one belt, one road, what China's doing, but this is a slow roll into a change, if you will, of the world as we know it, as far as country sovereignty, borders, monetary units.
Well, they said the big meeting on BRICS.
So today or tomorrow, it's happening right now. Yeah,
they're having it today, and then Putin had to, I guess, zoom in or whatever he was doing, because he has a international arrest warrant out for him. But China and Russia were both saying for Africa of how we're going to support you. We're sending money to South America. We're sending money to Africa. We're going to be your new support. We're going to help build you. And
well, they already are through the cobalt and mining rights and shit like that, and the rail systems they're setting up. I mean, they've already set up shop in the continent of Africa, as well as South America, Central America, basically Latin America. I mean, they're going in and helping these guys get their shit out of the ground. I mean, of course, they they're taking it over kind of on the low. But yeah, this is the new global paradigm. I don't know if they're setting China up for a fall, but they're allowing the whole infrastructure to be set up via the Belt and Road. So, and I don't know, again, as globalism takes over and borders kind of start dissolving, will it always be a China? That's why I'm sorry, going back to what I was talking about Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He's like, we got to stop with the whole nation state versus nation state, Coke versus Pepsi. We're always taking that Pepsi challenge of the binary black and white. It's like, it's always deeper than that. But they use our inherent tribalism to like fire up the Chinese, fire up the US against, that East versus West clash of civilizations. Meanwhile, all of this other machinations are taking place behind the scenes, like I said, i.e. asymmetrical warfare that we don't necessarily see. But like at the end of the day, he even agreed, and I even said this, like China's taking shit over, literally, and they haven't fired a single fucking shot. That's the whole difference between asymmetrical fifth generation warfare and like kinetic warfare. You can't just go bombing into taking pieces over. You want to take hearts and minds, not just land and resources. You want to, get the populace's okay, if you will, as you go in and pull all their minds out. You build infrastructure, you build homes, you build hospitals and shit like that. But you also own their mighting rights, which is that kind of like sleight of hand, which is kind of how they roll with it. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, like they say, a war is won before it's ever fought, and that's what they're executing right now.
Right. We're definitely in for very interesting next few months to see what's going to come out of all of this. And then especially with BRICS really kicking off, and if it's going to supplant the US dollar, the petrodollar, and they're going to start trading in that, it's going to be not great for the United States, apparently. And, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's literally shifting right in front of our eyes. That's why I often say on the show and like on our side, are just like the global chessboard, the grand chessboard of, as we see it, is like, not to get too deep into this, but like when I was in community college in like the early 90s, Dr. David Crine, rest in peace, he told me about the Spratly Islands. And he told me ages ago, I don't know how he knew, he's a very, very brilliant man, that this was about to happen. China's going to start building bases on this area called the Spratly Islands, which has billions and billions and billions of barrels of natural gas and oil that no one's ever really talks about. But that's where they really set up shop with in the South China Sea, taking that over to fuel this machine, if you will, of global expansion. But yeah, this has been going on for a while, dude. This has been going on for a while, but we're distracted by stuff, UFOs,
all the ground level stuff, all the easy stuff. So do you think the new recent government interest in UFOs is just complete distraction? Do you think there's any truth to what they're pushing?
Possibly. I mean, I think it is definitely a distraction, and they're just so casual. I mean, people are like, no, they would never let the thing about the UFOs out because it would mess up everyone's religion. It would be such a shock, like War of the Worlds type shit. But they've been kind of already conditioning us through movies and, Independence Day, E.T. I mean, they've been letting us know for a long time. But even though they're just movies, that kind of soft disclosure has been happening for a long time. I think there is a different kind of nefarious end to this. And I have my own suspicions on that. But yeah, I think there's more to it than what they're talking about.
See, I also think
I think it's definitely possible. We've caught shit and been experimenting. I mean, this universe is a big place, dude. The universe is a big place. So,
right. So,
and then people say, like, why would they use a ship? And I don't. This gets into a much larger conversation that I'm not really qualified to talk about, but I can hypothesize. It's less so much of a like, hey, we're going from planet A to planet B, and we're taking billions of light years. I think, kind of Einstein, they're folding time and doing some extra dimensional type shit. And I don't even think necessarily they're utilizing physical ships per se. I know that gets out there, but there's definitely stuff going on that we don't know about. God forbid.
Let's just say that they are outer space UFOs and we capture them. Or let's even just say, people keep saying that the government's 50 years ahead. The technology is 50 years ahead.
Without a doubt.
But we also don't really ever see that technology. Now, granted, it is top secret, whatever it's going to be. But, you would think that the triangle UFO, like we would have seen flown over Syria or Ukraine, they would take it for a spin.
But we did. Like when they unleashed or let us see the B-2 bomber, the B-2 stealth bomber, that big fucker. But they started constructing that long before they let it be known. This is the thing as far as tech. I'm old, but when they gave us Atari back in the day, in my opinion, they had Sony tech. But it's that slow rollout to make a shit ton of money. I could be completely wrong on that, but I think that's kind of a metaphor for what we're talking about. A lot of the stuff we see, could it be extraterrestrial shit? Of course it could be. And I think it's also reverse engineered shit from Skunk Works, from DARPA. I mean, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. It could be extraterrestrial shit and back engineered, reverse engineered shit as well. So it's a combination of the two.
Is so they can take that leap and put out more technology. Like it's not going to be so linear that you saw it go from Atari to 8-bit Nintendo to the 16-bit to 30 Genesis, that you're going to have that Atari to PlayStation. And you're like, whoa, how'd you guys do that? And this isn't going to be for like the greater humanity. They're still going to find a way to put a price tag on it. But it's
okay, so this gets into kind of what I was saying earlier that I didn't want to get into. But I mean, in my opinion, you're absolutely right. They're basically going to sell the same tech they were going to bring in to remedy climate change. Now they're rebranding it, and it's like, no, hey, aren't you cool? You're part of this Star Trek, Star Wars world of all this reverse engineered technology, and that's how they'll sell it to us now, as opposed to, I mean, they're still going to tag us and chip us and have everything monitored and shit, but it's going to be a part of this, I could be completely wrong, but I think they're just rebranding and selling this shit to us differently, because they were getting, same with why eugenics had to rebrand into climate change, because it just didn't play well PR wise. Like, why are you saying, there's only certain people who should live, elite motherfuckers. So then they had to be like, no, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, if you know what that is. But that's essentially the release of this supposed alien tech. If they were this new tech, that's how they're going to get us into Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, as opposed to the climate change, which isn't working so well. The Greta Thunbergs and Al Gore's with their inconvenient truths isn't playing so well anymore.
Right. It's hard when you put a finite date on something happening, and then 10, 15, 20 years later, zero that has happened. And then they keep saying, but no, like in 10 more years. Like, okay, well, it hasn't happened for the last 50.
So, but then and I'm no expert on it, but then they allude to like, dude, there was Hillary, the storm hit LA and a fucking earthquake went down. Like, dude, that's climate change. I mean, or the fires in Maui. Look at the fires going on all over the freaking planet. It's like their automatic jump is to climate change. And I'm sure there's like, if there's no rain and shit dries out, a simple spark can get some shit going. But I mean, I just think and that's kind of how my mind works. Unfortunately, I often feel there's always something behind the story. Not everything is a conspiracy, but I mean, just the things I'm hearing about, like Maui and these fires, and what I was just telling my girl. Remember a week ago, like everything was blacked out in New York City because of the supposed Canadian fires that swept down. I mean, so like this is all they're using it to keep pumping the narrative on climate change. Is my larger point. Like, see how bad it is? Oh my god, it has to be climate change.
It's funny. We were at a Phillies game. We took a group trip with a bunch of people in the neighborhood, a bunch of friends. And so we go to the Phillies game. It was on July 1st. DJ Shaq Diesel was DJing after the game. Like, whatever that guy was getting paid, like, good for him. He's never retire.
I think I saw that. I think I saw a video of that. Unless he does that a lot. I think I saw that video.
It was amazing, man. He has a lot of energy, and he just yells. And like, I don't even think he was playing
Shaq
anything.
Diesel.
He just hit play, and he was having the best time ever. So, but we're hanging out. We're like the top of the stadium hanging out with a bunch of people. And we ended up talking to some guys from Toronto, and they were there for a bachelor party or whatever. And it was, hey guys, like, thanks a lot for all this smoke. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about? We have no smoke in Toronto. It's all blowing down to you. So there they are with the fires right there, not even affecting them. But this
that's I kind of looked at that too. The wind patterns. It's like that larger jet stream, even though it is right next door, if it takes that whole, I mean, that's a lot of energy. And interesting stuff though. I find.
Yeah, it really was fascinating. Like, so you guys left where the fires where there was no smoke.
It came down here
where there's zero fires. There's tons of just weird. So I see your picture behind you, and it's JFK. President was slain. Did you happen to catch RFK Jr.'s interview with Tucker?
I did. I caught chunks of it. Cut chunks of it. Yeah.
I think he is so well spoken, and the knowledge just at the tip of his tongue, that like everything that he clarifies, just general in policy that he wants to do, and then his knowledge of geopolitical for the last 50 years. Yeah. And then when he started getting into his uncle JFK and who he thought did it, I just thought the
fact that he had the balls to do that. And I think it even goes deeper. I think people downplay oftentimes the aerospace industry and the death of their role in the military industrial complex. But that's a whole nother conversation. But for him to name, the CIA and the FBI, which has been the third, it was, and of course, there's more crazier conspiracy theories, but that was like the third rail. If you didn't think Lee Harvey Oswald with this shitty rifle did what he did on the 6th floor. But when he said things like, no, it was Thane Eugene Caesar who stood behind my dad and shot him 4 times. And you look at the autopsy report from Dr. Noguchi, it was two inches behind the guy's right ear. Sirhan was like 5 feet in front. And like that alone for me, close case. You can get into whatever about the magic bullet and, this kind of crap. But that right there just lets you know. And if you know about Thane Eugene Caesar, how he just popped up on the scene, was a part of the aerospace industry. Yeah, clearly more to that. But the fact that he was balls enough to come out and say that is setting a weird tone, because like I said, I'm a little older, and I'm wondering, what do you think? Maybe the Kennedy thing just isn't doing what it did 20, 30 years ago. Like the Kennedy, Camelot, JFK Jr., when he died, I think it kind of died with that because that family just went through even more and more shit. And then Teddy Kennedy died. That luster, if you will, or if that's even the right word, that, you know what I mean? It's just not playing as well. And I think this whole generation has no fucking clue about JFK or RFK or, you know what I mean?
Well, because they were America's royalty. And they lived, off Massachusetts, and they had, beautiful giant homes. And RFK Jr.
Poet.
Yeah, and JFK Jr. He was in New York City, and he was like a playboy out and about, and he was living the high life, the good life.
Was about to run for the Senate seat that Hillary wound up winning.
Yeah. So again, though, but also more of that royalty. And RFK Jr. Granted, I don't follow the Kennedys on a day-to-day basis, but I would say for 20 years, I had no idea what RFK Jr. did until he just came back onto the scene. So either he wasn't looking for the spotlight, Teddy Kennedy, spotlight passed by it, but So the name almost got tainted more as time went on.
True that.
Now he's coming back, and I would say he's not pushing Camelot, even though he's married to Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. But for him to come out to really voice his opinions, like his anti-establishment, like, I'm going to talk about things that are publicly known secrets that people whisper within these circles, and I'm going to come out here and publicly say it, and it affects my family, and I'm not getting Secret Service protection. And I'm going to say, you could see the wheels.
You're going to write a book about Dr. Fauci, the real Dr. Fauci. That in and of itself is a freaking almost game changer for anybody who does something like that these days.
He was calling, when he was going to Fort Detrick, and after the
Anthrax
Patriot Act, and Patrick Leahy got voting, and the other guys, I forget his name, but two people who didn't vote for the Patriot Act, they're the two that got the anthrax sent to them, that they traced back to Fort Detrick. And after they got it, then they voted for the Patriot Act. And to see that came from the intelligence community to get leaked out, like, that is insane. And for this guy to go on here for your top programs are probably Rogan and Tucker, and then like a couple other people, but
he was on Theo Vaughn, I think, before he started running. But even no, you're absolutely right. And the fact that the MSM, the mainstream, just like completely ghosts him, other than to talk shit about him, just lets you know. I never sign on this level. I never really know, not to get too deep into that, but we're all looking for the savior. We're all messianic and like, hey, someone's going to come save me. And now it's fucking Robert Kennedy Jr. But I don't think that's ever necessarily the case. But I think his candidacy is interesting. And I think the fact that they're ignoring him is interesting. And some of the things he's having to say, speaking truth to power, if you will, is very interesting, especially as it relates to who killed his dad and his uncle.
Yeah, I think if you're waiting for somebody to save you, you're going to die waiting. But I think if you take inspiration from these people speaking out, and you can apply that into your life, or even low-level government, if you want to run for local school boards, you want to run for mayor, you can create more change for your circle than you could at a higher level, which is it's in muck. It's really hard to
corny
change
phrase, whatever. Think globally and act locally. We have to take our communities back. Know our sheriffs, be at our our city council meetings and things like that. Because I'm not saying it's too far gone on a federal level, but if we're going to make it work, it's got to happen locally. But then that gets into oftentimes federal money tainting local shit, sheriffs and Homeland Security money and things like, hey, do this or you're not going to get this federal dough. Very similar to what they did with like the Interstate Commerce Act in the 50s to put interstates through the country. Like, we're going to put I-80 through your state. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, you're not going to get a shit ton of federal money. And that's usually how the grift goes down. It's like they basically blackmail. But that's kind of a larger conversation. Again, it's all organized crime.
No, right, it is. But at the federal level, even when one side has control of everything, you still don't see sweeping changes. And then everybody's outraged. Oh, look, the squad's going to do this. The squad's socialist. They've
had plenty of time. They've had plenty of time. Yeah,
like, at all. And it's all just this fear.
This goes back to the mass.
People.
Yes, of course. When, like you said, nothing comes of it. There's nothing to show for it. But then the next crew comes back like, oh no, these are the real ones who are going to do it. That's that mass Stockholm syndrome I was talking about. It's scary to realize how fucked up this shit is, because literally it gets into like, oh, you're lying about this and this, huh? What else are you lying about? And then it really gets into the real question of like, man, you've been lying about this for so long. Now, really, what am I going to do about it? And usually the answer to that question is not what we like to romanticize, because like I was saying about cobalt and all this shit, we go along, even though we're pissed about some stuff, we go along to get along to a large extent. And generally, when it comes time to putting our courage to our convictions to some degree and like really putting our foot down, like, no, this is it. It's the line's pretty far for us to really get. There's so much shit to get pissed at, but we just don't, because we're comfortable. As long as my Netflix is streaming and my phone's working and And I'm not saying it's about everybody, but that's kind of the malaise that kind of happens to certain countries or certain societies when they're just too fucking comfortable. And we definitely are. Even though we know some foul shit's happening right in front of us or right around us.
That's the hard part to separate and to get people. One, I think half people don't care, so they just go on with their life, and they need the new Jordans, and they need. I can't believe that the media told me Kanye said something terrible without, listening to him or appreciating that he has some mental health issues that he needs to address more. And he's also like creatively crazy. Like, I think that's like part of his brand is to like, how much can I stir things up because I'm this Andy Warhol type person.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it. And I think sometimes he just says things more for the reaction than for what his true belief is. And he also says things without thinking them out. But hey, when you're a $1 billion company, you really shouldn't do that. But
well, and that's what we're attracted to. We're attracted to the controversy. Like we're literally in a fucking Jerry Springer type society. It's next level. You're seeing the groups, the flash mobs snatching up hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gear and running out. I mean, and then recording it. I mean, it's next level what we're seeing.
It's really, those flash mobs and people not doing anything. And then you'll see, a Walmart greeter tackle somebody and they try to fire that person for stopping theft. And like, okay, so I'm just not going to do anything.
And they're having to close now Walmarts and a lot of places, dude. This is, and like my boy said oftentimes on the show when COVID, look at what's happening with people in society and their bellies are still full. Their phones are still on. Wait till the zombie apocalypse will happen or the grid goes down. Like, you think people are ratchet and fucking losing their mind now? Wait till it goes really, really for real sideways.
Yeah, you have to hope that doesn't happen. But hey, power goes out for a week. The food's not there, and like some of these people, they're not.
Well, this goes back to it. Not that this is going to cause it, but like this next lockdown that's coming, or the masks, or like that's not going to be met well by a lot of people. All the people who really knew or who really knew beforehand to not get into this shit, or looked in hindsight, it was like, see, I told you. And those people who like went with it that's going to be a clash still, man. There'll be more on the people who are, like I said, I think more people get it now, but it's not going to be good, man. And it's not just going to happen to the US. If they start locking shit down again, it'll be global.
Oh no,
it's not going to go well.
Oh yeah. And for what the first lockdown, everyone's like, oh, my crazy friend who told me what's coming from China is not real, or I don't even think anybody ever said the coronavirus wasn't real, but like they like to say that, oh, they were saying it's not real. Just saying it's not as dangerous as people are telling you. But hey, masks don't stop, all these things. And they're like, oh, my friend's so insane. And now all that stuff is coming out.
My friend's a doctor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And now that stuff is coming out that, hey, like masks don't really do anything. And, masking your kid up has really set them back, probably their entire childhood.
It's actually bad for you. Or ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine actually works.
Right.
Joe Rogan's not a fucking moron.
But I think all the thing with the kids, they're showing that depression has spiked in children.
Domestic violence back in the day, freaking suicides, emergency room visits, people beating their freaking pets and their kids' asses, dude. It was next level what this did. Yeah. And we have the numbers on it almost 4 years later. So the fact that they're willing to ramp this up again, I mean, that's why I'm saying I think most people who really understand this is like, no. What do you mean? A mutated, less deadly virus? You want to do this again? And, right. And with the election coming, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
So the people who spoke out, they're going to speak louder. And the people who judged in their head and were just like, hey, man, like, if you think that's going to stop you, like, you go do you, and that's fine. We're still friends. I think that person now is going to speak out and be like, are you sure? Like, it's kind of stupid what you're doing. Before it was like keeping the peace. And I think now the next time this comes through, it's going to be
because again, I think we've come to understand the larger social impact of what happened with this. And again, not saying in any way, shape, or form is not real. But I mean, come on, man, you get into the incentivizing all the stuff, death certificates, intubations, remdesivir. I mean, it's just, we all know there was some fuckery afoot. But you're still going to always have that contingent of the populace who just, whatever they say, lockstep.
Do you think in January 2020, when those videos from China were coming out, that they were doctored? Like there was people collapsing on the street. There were,
a point that I always heard brought up, like China has a very tight internet. So it's like, how are these videos getting out? And that was kind of one of my, I mean, I'm not saying they're doctor, maybe not, but I was like, well, how are they getting out? Because they have, they have kind of an intranet as opposed to an internet, I believe it's referred to, but it's very tightly regulated. So I don't know. You just anything more, as we've seen with deep fakes and everything, anything audio or video or photographic you look at, you have to have some measure of skepticism anymore, regardless of how real or legitimate it looks. And I hate to say that and like, question every, at least like if you're family photos, the shit's real. I'm just saying the shit they're showing you on TV or whatever, grain of salt, man. Did we go to the moon? I don't know, but I know they faked a bunch of shit. And so it leads me, I don't go down there. I'm friends with Eddie Bravo, and I'm actually going to be on a show here in a couple of weeks. Like, because they've lied about stuff like that doesn't mean we never went or the Earth's flat. But I get that whole throw the baby out with the bathwater. Goes back to what I was saying about Stockholm syndrome. I know people who just like believe, who reject anything the government says. And I'm kind of in that camp too, but I also have discernment, and some things are whatever. But some people are willing to like, nope, you lied to me once. I believe nothing you say.
Right. It's all done. Like the NASA stuff is interesting, and some of the stuff like they cut off or whatever it might be. And I think they would be better if NASA came out and said, yeah, I don't know if they went to the moon or not. I don't know. But one thing that I would stake money on that footage is not real, that was filmed beforehand. And that was just because this was a nationalistic race between us and Russia. We had to get there first. And if we were banking on everything for us to get there, and hey, I get that like film and the X-rays can't go through the van. I get all that stuff. I get it.
See, that would have been that was another one of my points. Like,
But if they did, they got up there and they were banking on having that filmed up there and bringing it back. At any point that mission doesn't go well and Russia gets there first and brings it back, Russia wins the space race. Like we needed to win the space race. So we filmed it in a studio, sent those guys up. Did they go there or not? I don't know. That footage, though, I think that would have been aired no matter what. That could have
one of the
space, and they would have still aired it.
Yeah, no, I get it. For Neil Armstrong to step on, I've been in film TV production for the last 25 years. Like, so Neil Armstrong stepped off the freaking thing. Who's filming him with the camera? Is that not the first person on the moon? If you're capturing him coming down the thing and he's like, "Hey, Eagle has landed," so who's filming him? And even when the pod like jumps up, the not Saturn V, but the little whatever, the lunar lander, that thing, when it just bounces up, like, and the camera follows him up. I'm like, who's shooting that?
They left the poor guy there, man.
Huh?
They left some poor guy up there.
Yeah, that's what it's not it's one of those kind of dumb questions, but then you're like, yeah, who was filming Neil when he touched down? Did they just, bro, we can't give you the credit. It has to be Neil, right? So there's this guy, there's this fifth Beatle out there, or whatever you want to call it. That's like
stagehand Eddie, and they're like, he's like, man, that was me. Like, no, but he was trying to get free drinks at bars the rest of his life. He's like, ladies, listen, I was the first guy on the moon,
and he has no way to prove it. If he even lived, like if he was that guy, right when he touched down, they probably took him out.
Yeah, he just had like a tether belt, so as the thing went up, it pulled him up, and they just fished him in.
That's about the tech they were using. Shit.
Yeah. Have you on Twitter? Have you seen any of this new MH370 stuff going on? The Malaysian plane that disappeared.
Nothing recently on Twitter, but I've heard it bits and pieces talked about a little bit more.
Yeah. So the Malaysian plane disappears. I think it was like 2013, 2014. So apparently I'd want to say it's a new video, but it's not. I guess it's a new Reddit thread has come up, and like 2 months after the plane disappeared, there was this, alleged spy satellite footage that came up, and then it shows 3 orbs circling the plane that creates some type of portal, and the plane disappears into. So strange, probably not true, probably doctored, all this stuff. There's a couple accounts on Twitter that have just like refused to let this go over the last week, and people are trying to debunk it. Even like a mainstream like magazine article came out like saying how it was fake. Mick West obviously said it was fake. The guy's never said anything was real once his entire life. I'd love that guy to say something obvious.
I don't know who that is. I'm not sure who that is.
You don't know Mick West? I think he was even on Rogan. Like he oh man, he put nothing is real. Oh, everything is real to him. Every single conspiracy, he has an exact reason on why that's not true.
Well,
it's crazy.
They're
it's
out
crazy.
There. They're out there.
Yeah,
it's all good.
So he ripped it apart. But these guys, apparently, they keep looking at the video, and they're having other people look at it. If you stabilize the images, it's showing 3 orbs circle the plane and then creates this black hole. So I'm like, all right, that's weird. Probably not true.
Like I said, anything you see video anymore, I mean, fuck, dude. I mean, it's CGI, and I mean, it's the tech is everywhere where anybody could literally sit in a laptop and create some wild shit. But I always, like, unless I'm actually there, like, I don't know, dude. Like, I wasn't there when we did or didn't go to the moon. Like, I always, like, I wasn't there when Kennedy got shot. I wasn't there for 9/11, but my considerations suggest X, Y, Z. I don't ever necessarily do the like, no, this is it. The whole like, it's not impossible, you know, it's probable or whatever. Like whatever you're describing, of course, I believe it could possibly happen because I believe there's a lot of shit going on out there that we have no clue of. Do I think it really happened? I mean, probably not.
Yeah, so I'm in that boat. And again, I'd have to go and cross-reference and fact-check all this stuff. But also, apparently the guy who found all the there's like one guy that found like the 4 pieces of wreckage. It's all the same guy. And so there's not stuff washing up. It was all washing up on like Madagascar and the east side of Africa. Some of the stuff was washing up. And it's all the same guy who found the stuff. So if that's true, that makes things even more suspicious for this. But, you know, so apparently these were top secret US spy satellites that knew where the plane was. They were going over, they redid the flight path for it and they were showing, and then the plane was circling over a couple airports because I guess the size of the plane could only land at certain airports, and then people weren't responding. It was going there, so went to this next one, and then these 3 orbs zapped it into the other world.
When I hear stuff about suspicious downed planes, my first question is like, who was on it? Because my mind just goes there. I mean, plane crashes happen all the time, but like sometimes it's, you know, I don't know if you've heard or familiar with the Titanic conspiracy theories on the Astors and the people who were resistant to the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. So they took anyway. So my mind often goes there when I hear about plane crashes, and then you wind up finding out certain people are on there like, oh, you know, Senator John Tower back in the 80s, or, you know, the Ron Brown plane crash that supposedly was just whatever. This just shit like that. Key bono, man. And when oftentimes stuff happens, it's like, all right, who's benefiting from this? And sometimes it's just Occam's razor, man. The most simplest answer is what it is. But we live in a very Machiavellian world. So it's like stuff oftentimes is in no way, shape, or form what it appears to be.
Right. If there's like 3 owners of a patent and 2 of them go on a plane and then it crashes, like, why doesn't somebody look at that guy? But instead they're like, oh, it just happened to be a malfunction. And now this guy becomes a billionaire.
Right. Yes. But it's one of those things that's always circumstantial. You can never prove like, oh, so that's why they killed. It's always just like, no, it was whatever the official version. It was a malfunction. It was, you know, whatever and you're always the conspiracy theorist if we happen to speculate otherwise. When the official version becomes XYZ, Lee Harvey Oswald, Osama bin Laden, whatever it is, anything you say other than that, Sirhan going back to that, you're a conspiracy guy. No matter how much you can convince, like I said, with the Robert Kennedy thing, 2 inches behind his ear, that was closed case for me, dude. When the alleged shooter's 5 feet in front of him, all right, that's a wrap, man. Whether it was Dane Eugene Caesar or not, it was, I don't know, it wasn't what the tell they told us.
That evidence is so clearly right there, and then people don't buy into that. And then the Warren Commission moved JFK's wound like 4.5 inches, which if you just tell somebody like, oh, that's probably not a lot, and then you look, it's like from the shoulder to the back and neck is 4.5 inches. You know, well, Jesus, they moved it half his body.
The bullet, the magic bullet, like, dude, this created what 5, 6, 7 wounds, and it's like a
pristine
condition, on damn near pristine.
Yeah.
So I had the amazing opportunity to interview Dr. Cyril Wecht, who's a forensic pathologist. He served on the Kennedy House Select Committee on Assassination. Our whole conversation, because I didn't have much time with him, was just about that and the single bullet theory. And he just like went through just how fucking just on its face absurd. Never in the history of ballistics have you seen anything like this that supposedly did all this damage. But that's, you know, like they said in JFK, they sold this lemon to the American public.
Yeah. And then people still buy it and they don't want to go back out on it.
Because again, it goes, you know, okay, it wasn't us. It was the government publicly executed a president driving broad daylight through a major city in the U.S. with his wife, and what?
That's nuts, man.
It's like Shakespearean type shit. We don't want to grasp how like wild some shit is. So yeah, they'll feed us the nonsense for sure.
Does Eddie Bravo give you a hard time with the map behind you of the world? Or it's okay,
no,
it's flat.
I texted him. It's been a minute when I texted him. He's like, "You flat yet?" I was just like, "No,
yeah,
no, not flat yet, brother." Eddie's amazing, dude. I'm looking forward to talking to him.
So before we started recording, you know, I asked you if your foot was okay because you were dropping names. He said Sam Tripoli, and I was like, "Oh, you okay?" you know. But so that's really cool.
I love Sam's a great friend of mine. I've known Sam a long time now, man. He let me open for him and Eddie when he came to St. Louis. I'm not even a stand-up comic, but he let me do it. But I've known Sam. You know, like everybody's going through shit in life, and like life's been crazy sometimes. And Sam always calls, checks on me. Not that it's just a friend, you know what I mean? I'm chill, but it's just like someone to say, man, just making sure you're good, man. And it's a beautiful thing because he doesn't have to do that. And he's a very busy motherfucker. So I got nothing but love with Sam for Tripoli. Loyal to the foil. That's
it, man. He has a great show. So when you opened up, how many were you nervous? Like how many people were there?
You know, there was quite a few people, but I was talking to a friend about it the other day. I've been doing this for a long time, like interview, even though there's a certain disconnect, but it's like I'm a voiceover actor. So I mean, I've been kind of in the realm of entertainment, if you will, for a minute. I've been rattled a few times. I've interviewed people, but it's never. Long story short, when I got up there, I wasn't very rattled, man. I've been doing this like on the mic podcast. I mean, I've interviewed fucking George Foreman, Christ's sake. Like all these, I'm not mean to name drop. That's not what I'm saying. But all of this got me used to public speaking, and it's not that big of a fucking deal. People say it's like the worst fear of their life. Like, what are they going to do if you public speak? They're going to take away your birthday? You're just talking in front of people. So, I announced, MMA fights, boxing fights, this kind of shit. So it's like I've been in that public sphere for a minute. So the real pressure, not that I was nervous, but just like trying to make my role's different. I can talk all day, as you can hear, but making people laugh and being funny, that's a little different. I'm a funny guy sometimes, but that kind of like formulaic, structured funny, like that's different. Creating an act. It was only 5-10 minutes, I think it was, but even with that, filling that with something funny was not easy.
So you have to have like a tight 7.5, and then just keep saying, "St. Louis, how you feeling?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. You get.
But I would say at least with Sam's crowd, from what I've seen and what I've heard, it's kind of if it's not going for you, then just dive into conspiracy stuff, and the people are going to eat it up, and like it's hard to be.
Well, like I said, my bit was only like 5-6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but then at the end we did do a Q&A, so they asked us questions, and that was like more my realm, was like answering questions kind of like this. But I mean, it was just really cool, dude, because years ago when I was a kid, I did stand up and I bombed fucking horribly. And over this many years, I told myself, like, you gotta at least get back and try it one more time. And so when Sam came here, I was like, "Hey, dude, you want to open for me?" I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here!" But it happened twice. We did it twice, but it was just cool to get that off the check that off the list of like you wanted to do it, and I'm glad you did it. And I even did it a few times after, and I still might even look into it. But it's stand-up comedy is not easy.
No, I can imagine, especially you go out there and it doesn't hit right away, and you're just fuck, like, is it over yet? Can I just walk off?
It didn't. I didn't bomb. I didn't. It was just. It was just a pressure to the pressure to be funny. I had a weird kind of sense of humor, and so whatever. They kind of knew who I was as well, because like knowing I'm being from St. Louis, like they knew kind of it was the tinfoil hat comedy with Jeff, who does conspiracy farm. So a lot of people who came out already knew who I was, so I've already kind of broached my weird sensibilities, so they kind of were already aware. So I don't know. It was fun though. It was absolutely amazing.
No, I think that's great. I've never tried stand-up comedy. I like to think that I'm a little bit funny, but it's usually more like quick and like play on words, or like if you say something, I can like
that's me.
Zip something
That's me.
in. Yeah. So to go up there with like a tight 15 would be like, oh my God, I don't
15,
know.
I couldn't even, or a tight 60 or 45 or an hour. Like I said, I did 5 minutes, dude. And even that was like a fucking marathon.
Yeah. Like,
just knowing the whole thing of dropping the bit, let it breathe. Like I talk too fast sometimes. So like, I'm just like, hey, and don't, like Sam told me, like, give them time to laugh, dude. Like, calm down and give them a second to laugh at your joke. Don't just jump to the next thing. So there's a formula to it, dude. There really is.
Yeah, when you see the pros do it, I mean, that's crazy. And then you'll see stuff like Chappelle like set the record by like a 24-hour bit, and like half that was smoking cigarettes and him just telling stories. Like Chappelle's funny anyway, so he could just tell you, what he got at the grocery store, and you would crack up. But like even just up there, like for that long, dude, that's just nuts, man. Good for those guys.
That seems a little bit much, but whatever. To each his own. Seems like a lot.
Did you happen to catch Post Malone on Rogan at all?
Very little bit.
Okay, so he had like a 4-hour interview with him. I keep quizzing you about Rogan. This isn't like the Brian.
No, that's right.
Jeffery on Rogan, right? So Post Malone, like I know some of his music. Like my kid likes the Spider-Man movie, so I know stuff on there and like whatever's on the radio. So I was kind of indifferent about him. I'm like, like I was driving to work, like I'll check this out. Post Malone, man, you have better connections than I do. You should see if he wants to come on your show. This guy is ready to go. He was all over. Big score. He was all over. Do you know Dr. John Brandenburg for Mars? That Mars was nuked. You ever hear any of this stuff? That there was a giant.
I've heard that theory, but I didn't hear. I don't know that person.
Yeah, so he was the scientist who found the chemical or the element that only comes from a nuclear bomb, and then we know this because we tested the air prior to our nuclear test, and then after, this element showed up after. So Dr. John Brandenburg was working at NASA in the 70s, and we sent the rover up there, whatever, and it came back, and he saw I forget whatever the element is, and this was all top secret stuff at the time. And if you Google his name, he gives a very good interview. He's very, he's a scientist, so he's a little dry, but it's fact.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah. So he's really good on there. So Post Malone's bringing it up. He's like, I was watching videos about this, and he was asking Rogan if he knew about it. And Rogan's like, I think I heard about it, but I don't know. And he didn't have a lot of detail on it, but so that was interesting. Then he was asking about the face on Mars. He's like, oh, have you ever seen the face or all these artifacts on Mars?
Cydonia.
Cydonia, yeah. So there's this other podcast. It's called Earth Ancients, and Cliff Dunning. I don't know how I found it one time, but he'll just go over a lot of the stuff is like weird stuff in America in general. And so he has these guys who, and he had Dr. John Brandenburg on. Maybe that's how I found him. But Earth Ancients. So he has these guys who are photo specialists, and they went back and looked at the face. So the first time the picture of the face, people saw it. Then they came back around, did it again. What they did was they invert the image, they darkened it, they messed with all the scales on it to make it look blurry and not there anymore. So
Yeah.
there are people that are going through and able to look at the raw data and extract the image out of it. And apparently there's more faces up there.
That was actually shown on CNN in the early 90s by Dr. Richard Hoagland. He's the one who really cracked that egg many, many, many years ago. And he's still around, I think, with his website Enterprise Mission. But he actually was on CNN with the Mars. It's got like the D&D pyramid structure layout, kind of like this Giza area. You had the face, and then you had these pyramids similar to the Giza Plateau. But yeah, it's interesting. I've always been into that stuff, dude. Always been fascinated by that.
It's really fascinating. They show, even things you can't argue. Like, on Mars, that's where an ocean was. And then so you see that, and then that happens to be at Cydonia, and there's all these ruins. And like, well, no, those aren't ruins. That, like, okay, so a civilization just happened. Like here on Earth, we build stuff next to the ocean.
Yeah, when you start unpacking that one, dude, that's kind of one I've been going deep on for a while. Hopefully, working on a docuseries about it. But yeah, that rabbit hole goes when you start getting into how old everything really is. It's a wild one.
Yeah, I love. Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, and then how, you could walk from Florida out to the Bahamas. I think it was like, 40 or 60 miles. You've been able to walk that. That would have been where the ocean was then. But then people don't really go and look for ruins there. And like, oh, where's the civilization if this happened? Like, well, New Jersey's pretty flat out, but like, this would have been extra 40 miles out for us.
Well, that's where Bimini Road is, pretty much right off that area.
Right. And they said, that's just a natural formation. And of course that didn't happen. But New Jersey, for the most part, is 40 miles wide, at points. Like for me to get to the shore, it's 40 miles, and I'm 10 miles from Philadelphia. So you're saying if like New Jersey has disappeared in 100 years, like, 1,000 years, whatever, you would just say New Jersey never existed. Like, oh no, it's just Philadelphia. Of course there's nothing there. Like, where are the ruins? Like,
well, when you talk about the age of like the younger Dryads, which I've actually had when I'm not name dropping, this is what happened. I interviewed Randall Carlson a couple of times. But when you start talking about what the younger Dryas was essentially, the age between certain like Pleistocene or whatever it was, your area up in Northeast like that, you're under like fucking miles of ice, which is grinding on whatever may have been there. So nothing is really going to exist after 1,500, 2,000 years if you're under 2 miles of ice. That's literally just, steel's gone, wood's gone. I mean, it's just gone. And that's essentially why so much has been hidden. That's why it's so cool when you find certain ancient artifacts that were hidden, and certain things, like, not to go deep into it, but like the Library of Ashurbanipal and the Sumerian King list and shit like that they found hidden, that talk about, certain disasters that have come cyclically throughout our human history. And just, it dates back a long freaking time, not just Atlantis, but yeah, it's next level stuff. I find it very fascinating.
Do you give any credence to Tartaria and like the mud flood and things like that?
I've heard of Tartaria. I don't really know much about it.
So it's more of a Russian ancient civilization, and then somehow they erased them from history. But that was like the original, like, all roads lead to Rome. Yeah. This was like and they had this technology, whatever. And then people are saying that's kind of went with the mud flood, that there's buildings in San Francisco that have just appeared. Like the settlers went over, and then a year later, there's a whole city built. Like, well, where'd all this stuff come from? Where did you get the lumber? Why? Like, but, how when you went to install water lines, then why was there floors below the dirt? But all these cities, there's not a lot of pictures of them being built, but there's a lot of pictures of them being finished.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like, just like weird stuff like that. So like that stuff, I like to think about. But then you look at, even when they found the Sphinx, it was covered up with sand up to its nose almost. It was up to its chin. Like, where'd all that sand come from? Like, how did it bury a pyramid? Like, how,
Well, and that just gives credence to the cataclysms that buried a bunch of shit throughout the world at, in certain longitude, if you will. But yeah, and when you look at, once they uncovered the Sphinx, it began, people like John Anthony West and Robert Schoch were like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not wind erosion on these things. This was underwater at some point in time. And so they did the extrapolation to find out when water would have been there, which, 12,000, 13,500 BC, et cetera, if not older at different times. But yeah, that kind of lends credence to what Graham Hancock talks about all the time is we're a civilization with amnesia, simply because they take these discoveries and our religious, our political, our academic institutions just double down on that original narrative. Nah, motherfuckers, you guys are 6,000 BC, Fertile Crescent, shut the fuck up. And anything to the contrary is,
Yeah, I think the new wave, the 20-year-olds out there now who are finishing up college and going to start doing this, they've grown up with the Graham Hancock, with the Johnny Anthony West, with these specials that they've seen. And, I'm hoping that kind of triggers a new, a new science, a new understanding.
I hope so. Because I think our certain parts of the generation, more and more, the young, it's in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. And there's so much information. And again, it taps into that kind of zeitgeist we were talking about earlier. Like, everyone knows that we've been lied to about what? There's a whole bunch of it. But this is definitely a subject that I think you're right. A certain niche group of young kids are going to take this on and be like, whoa. Because for me, as a conspiracy guy, this is the Mount Olympus of conspiracies, who we are, where we came from. And when you get into like finding out how really wrong our history is, I mean, it's next level.
Right. If I was a professor at any university and I'm teaching archaeology and I wrote a book and my students have to buy it, and at one point I was a New York Times bestseller, like, I'm not letting that shit go. I'm not going to sit here and subscribe. Like that's my whole career. That's no one's going to buy my book anymore.
Well, that's not only just tenure at whatever university, like that's what you've built your whole thing on. Yeah. That's why they can't let it go, even if they know it's true. Like you said, it's multifaceted. Not only is their reputation, their life's work, it's their tenure, and again, it's this whole conventional model and narrative of what is goes away, and they don't like doing that. I mean, it goes back to, who was it? Not to Socrates they killed, but I mean, it was Galileo. It's just that simple. No, it's maybe sun's over here, the moon's or whatever it is. It's like the Earth's kind of rotating over. Nope, you went against that model, and anytime you go against that model, you're gonna get some heat for it, whether it was 2,000 years ago or in 2023.
It's all the same, man, and then you'll be vindicated years later.
Exactly. Well, hopefully
that's the goal. So you say you're working on a documentary now for some type of ancient history?
A docuseries I'm kind of working on with a few friends of mine on this subject. Yeah, ancient civilizations, just how old stuff is.
Can you give us a little highlight, a little tidbit?
I mean, that's pretty much, some of the more recent discoveries as far as archaeology is obviously showing that things are way older than what it is, but it kind of gets into our pre-Diluvian cities, which was Eridu, pre-flood, pre-disaster, and we're finding out where civilization basically picked up after this big disaster. So you're looking at basically Kish, which is in Iraq, and these new archaeological discoveries that are in eastern Turkey are really, really shedding light on a bunch of this. You're talking about megalithic structures that just shouldn't be there by people who did bronze tools, and they're able to date it to certain eras. So you see a lot of megalithic structures with more modern stuff built on top of it. So what the docuseries is hopefully going to get into is basically starting to pin down their ancient puzzle pieces, literally from all over the world, where we're finding this different megalithic stuff that's not necessarily supposed to be there. If they're saying the Inca built these things in Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, these places in Bolivia and Peru, all right, they couldn't have done it with these. We could see what they built on top. Again, more modern stuff. I get that, but the 30-ton, 15-ton stuff below, we're finding a tie in a certain civilization that was advanced, that spread throughout the world, and that's what we're going to get into, if that makes sense.
Do you think with any of this UFO disclosure, they had they talked about recovering some ancient UFOs, like the antiquity, these intact or crashed ones. Do you think if this ever comes out, or whatever narrative they spin, do you think they'll tie any of this to the old culture?
It's hard saying, honestly. I mean, I think there is possible extraterrestrial tie to some of the stuff I'm talking about, but I think I don't want to sell human beings short in this, that we were just built different before. Like you were talking about, your Russian, your Denisovians, your Cro-Magnon, like these are big motherfuckers, dude. And we think they're just so stupid or whatever. But as we could see through the archaeological discoveries, they weren't nearly as stupid as we've described them to be. So again, the rabbit hole just goes so deep, and we just keep finding out stuff just way older and older and older.
Is that the thing you're focused on most now? If like you could have one answer, is that like where you're at right now?
Yes, because these civilizations and these bloodlines, if you will, are the ones who've propagated the world as we know it now. So we're going back to literally the root of your elite families that run everything comes from these ancient bloodlines from Sumer. It's that for me that's the nut to crack right now.
I really thought when they came out with LiDAR, you would see a lot more. So that's they can take geographic surveys from above and see what's underneath the trees, the canopies, the sand, things like that.
Sure.
So they found a lot of things in the Amazon. They found cities that were completely grown over. I was really
Yeah.
hoping that was going to change faster. Kind of like a Google Earth type of deal. They could do a LiDAR overlay, and like we haven't quite gotten there yet. There's a tour guide in Egypt. His name's Anxiety, and he's on Twitter. And I was talking to him a little bit, and I was asking if they ever use LiDAR in Egypt, and he said they have, and there are thousands of things that they have like marked off under the sand, but they're not allowed to touch them. They're not allowed to dig them up.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to what I was saying about the city of Eridu. One of the first lines of the Sumerian Kings list, which is a very, very ancient, one of the most ancient, cuneiforms known. It's called "When Kingship Was Lowered from Heaven." It was in Eridu. So Eridu, technically, according to these myths, were one of the first city, but you don't even know about it. When you look at Google pictures, it's just like some ramshack just lump in the desert. Because I think when you start doing archaeological excavations, start pulling this stuff out, then it starts upsetting the apple cart as far as what we're talking about. It's like the age of civilization, et cetera. That's why it's been allowed to. And I have theories, the whole Iraq war, whatever. We can get into certain geopolitical part of it, but it was also part of an archaeological war because once it started, one of the first place like certain secret intelligence groups hit was the Library of Antiquity, like snatching up a bunch of stuff, which could obviously put some light on some of this. So yeah, it's a lot going on, man.
It's fascinating. One time Elon Musk tweeted out or X'd a picture. I don't know what you do anymore. Tweeted a picture, and it was his bedside table, and it was a fake gun from a movie, the replica gun of I forget what movie it was. He had like a can of Diet Coke, this other picture, and then it was this old Indian, the country India, like weapon that was on there. It was supposed to be like the top weapon of them all. And he like that was his bedside table. He's like, oh, that's my protection. And like, but you get it, then you think, oh, the guy's a nut and he's joking. And then there was people who were giving backgrounds on what that actually was. And it was like, well, if that's really what that is, like it is, you're talking about really ancient technology. And it's supposed to go back to when they were having the, I'm going to butcher it here, but they had the nuclear war in India. And
yeah, like I said, Elon Musk is not what he seems either. He's got more going on with him than he presents himself to be. But yeah, I'm sure he's a modern day Tony Stark. He's probably very hip to a lot of tech that's been suppressed.
Yeah, I don't see why he wouldn't.
Et cetera.
He's an interesting person, however you feel about him. And if you're a billionaire and you care about half the stuff, like why wouldn't you go buy these? So that's I like the ancient history of like what can we do. I also would love to know if somehow we could get a record of people's private collections. What did people buy up? What is in a person's own home museum that they've taken off the market that nobody knows about anymore?
Yeah, that's a huge ancient antiquity trade is definitely a real thing. It's definitely a big market that cats like you and I are even multi-million. Because you're talking priceless kind of artifacts that money buys it, but it's like you got to be pretty heavily caked up to be in these rooms.
Yeah, it's like the Vatican Library and that. Between those two, I think it's going to answer a lot of our...
The British Museum, Vatican Library, without a doubt. Yes.
Just fascinating stuff.
It is.
All right, Jeffrey, what do you have coming up? What's going on?
I'm just staying busy, man. Just like I knocked out a couple pods today. Like I said, it's hard for me, just with everything going on, it's hard to get like a structured schedule. But like I said, between the farm and my show, and I produce other shows for the network, we get her done, man. We get her done. Like I said, working on this docuseries, funding for the docuseries. And like I said, just staying busy, man. Just staying busy.
You have a
creating
Kickstarter
content,
or anything?
as we say.
Yeah,
I don't. I have a Venmo floating around somewhere, but I've got some decent sponsors and affiliates that I make some decent bread off of. It's anymore now, this kind of world. It's like, oh, you're a grifter. You're just doing it for money. I'm like, I've been doing it for 10 years. If I've been doing it for money, I've not doing. I make bread at it, but that's definitely not my motivation. I have a regular job. And it's like, this is not something I'm like selling ceramic knives. Of the sponsors I do have, are health and wellness, storable food. I'm a bald guy, so I got my skull shaver. Where is it? I got this guy here. It's awesome. I can do it dry.
Man, I see the difference.
I got great supporters of the show, man. And it's been a fun ride, and I love doing this stuff, man. I love having conversations with people like yourself.
I really appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the invite, man.
Anytime, man. Yeah. Where can people find you?
I'm pretty much, I don't do a lot. Well, if you want to look at it for Conspiracy Farm, it's Conspiracy Farm 1 at Conspiracy Farm 1. If you want to find me, it's me speaking to you. It's at It's Me Speaking To You. Like I said, I spell it. It's me, SPK, 2, the letter U. And then I'm also at I'm Jeffery Wilson, JFFFERY on Twitter. And I'm also on Instagram, rarely on that, but that's at JMichaelWill, 1L. And that's where I usually have my stuff going, man. Like the podcast, I just keep it kind of simple. I loved AM radio, so my podcast for mostly right now is just audio, and I got an RSS feed that's a little bit of everywhere. And I found that most people listen to it more than watch it. I mean, not a lot of time people have 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is to sit and watch, but they're at work or they're on the treadmill or they're driving. So I found from my analytics that keeping it audio, it's less overhead too. I don't have to worry about the cameras and editing and stuff like that. It just adds more work to the timetable, but. Yeah, dude, we have a blast, man. We're just, like I said, going to be adding more stuff to it, more content, more hosts, more shows on the network, but just doing our thing, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I only upload the audio. I mean, I record video because it's a little easier to actually see somebody when you talk, and like you can see pauses and adds the personalness as
That's true.
Hundreds of miles away. But sometime in the future, maybe I'll start doing clips because I save all this stuff with the video, but I don't do anything.
Clips are the move, man.
But maybe I'll start doing the clips. Yeah.
That's the move. I mean, people will watch a full show, but oftentimes, people's attention span and they just kind of want the segment cliff notes of the conversation more so than the whole conversation.
Right. And I still, I have to edit my caveman stuff at times. If I just leave it all like this, I guess with video it wouldn't be so bad, but with the audio, I do try to clean it up a little bit. Any of the pauses, any of the long ums and the, let me put something on my phone real quick. And like things that would be annoying to the listener all the time. So if they make that just disappear, then they're like, wow, Brian's so polished at doing this. I'm like, man, this podcast took 3 hours to edit. You have no idea, yes. But so if I did it with the video, it would never match up. So I think I'm gonna start looking into clips and see what I do with that, see what kind of traction I can gain, see what that can do. Because I haven't broached TikTok or anything. And a lot of people are on that. They talk about there's an algorithm you can game or whatever. But like, I know China has all my shit. I'm just not ready to give it to them yet.
That's the interweb in general. I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah, but coming soon. But man, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. If you want to shoot me that Venmo at some point, I'll put in the show notes. I'll push it out for you. Anything you have, obviously open door. Come on whenever you like.
I appreciate it, man.
I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for coming on, and have a great night.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, take care.
See ya.
All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date in all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guest. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.